Hey guys, thanks so much for checking out my podcast. Please click to subscribe. Can Luigi Mangione, the man accused of killing the insurance executive in New York City, be blamed for other mass shootings? And should that be a reason that he is eligible for the death penalty? That is what prosecutors are now arguing in a new court filing. It's very significant. I'm going to investigate it in this edition of Brian Ensign Investigates. Hey guys, so there's this new court filing from federal prosecutors in the Luigi Mangione case in New York City, again, trying to make this bigger than just the killing of the United Healthcare CEO, and trying to use that to justify the death penalty. So let me read you what they wrote in this latest filing. It says, the defendant wrote of the message he hoped this killing would convey, and they put message in quotes. The murder was thus, by the defendant's own admission, calculated to resonate beyond this specific victim and to generate scorn, outrage, or fear toward the health insurance sector more broadly. So again, calculated to resonate beyond this specific victim. Simply put, the defendant hoped to normalize the use of violence to achieve ideological or political objectives. And this is important. Since the murder, certain quarters of the public who openly identify as acolytes of the defendant have increasingly begun to view violence as an acceptable or even necessary substitute for reasoned political disagreement. The defendant poses a continuing danger not only in a personal capacity, but also because he has sought to influence others. So they say he has sought to influence others. The factual support for this aggravator is already within the defendant's possession. It includes his notebook and other pieces of evidence produced in discovery, as well as facts that are in the record. And then it says, see wanted CEO posters and others emerge after Mangione arrest. They're citing an NBC article. On July 28th, 2025, Shane Tamura brought in an assault rifle to a Manhattan office building a short distance away from where Mangione had killed Thompson. Tamura shot and killed 4 people, including an off-duty police officer, an executive of a financial services firm, and a security guard, and he injured others, including an employee of the National Football League. Like Mangione, Tamura left behind a piece of evidence for investigators to find, blaming the NFL and football for causing chronic traumatic, I don't know how to say this, and brain injury. Almost immediately, members of the public sympathetic to the defendant touted Tamura's actions as a laudable continuation of the defendant's philosophy. So they are trying to connect that shooting at the NFL offices in that building in New York City, remember the one recently, back to Luigi Mangione. And then they also say, following his arrest, the defendant openly cultivated supporters. They're talking back about Mangione again. That he openly cultivated supporters. He has set up a website on which he has directly addressed his supporters, and which includes a section for frequently asked questions, with questions like, may I send him items like books? Can I send Luigi photos? And what else can I send Luigi? It's luigimangione.info.com. The same website contains scanned images of an index prepared by the defendant himself, exhaustively cataloging all of the supportive letters he has received. These are actions for which the defense needs no disclosure because they are the actions of the defendant himself. So I'm joined by Ambrosio Rodriguez, a former prosecutor in California. Thank you for joining us, Ambrosio. I was super interested in this latest filing by prosecutors in the Luigi Mangione case. What do you think about this argument from prosecutors that they're making that he represents a future danger because others are, they say, using him as an example to kill?
I don't think, well, I think it's important just to talk about the idea of the death penalty in the terms of Mangione. I don't think Mangione will ever get the death penalty. They don't have enough for a jury, especially in a place like New York City, to find him, to give him the death penalty. The crime isn't heinous enough. Not only that, he's young, very charismatic. I think he has I just don't see it happening. And then the idea, I mean, I've done death penalty cases. I know how difficult that is as a prosecutor and what it requires, and it's just not there. I mean, in terms of the idea that, it's kind of like the Minority Report, right? I don't know if you remember that movie. The idea is that crime is stopped before it ever happens, before it's committed. And so the idea that he's a symbol and represents something, I've never seen that work. And I think it's a very dangerous idea that the government, you can use someone as the symbolism, what they inspire, as a reason to send someone to death.
It's interesting. They specifically cited this case not that long ago in New York City with the guy who went in shooting inside
Mhm.
the office building, concerned about, he was upset about concussions in the NFL and that whole thing. And they tried to connect that case back to the Mangione case. What did you think of that?
I think it's a stretch. I mean, I think they're right, in the sense of the moment that I, the I think when I think about the time that we're living through, I really do think about the time between 1890 to, World War, beginning of World War One, in terms of the disparity in income, in terms of the societal changes, large immigration. And, we had people like, there was, Sacco and Vanzetti, right? That famous trial from, I forgot the exact date, but it was during that period, right? And, the idea of anarchy as a political philosophy was really alive at that time. We have, and with a, we have it now, but it's on steroids, and there's a certain level of nihilism. So, is the NFL shooting, to me, is a sign of the times, as the idea that Mangione is some kind of leader or inspiration. There's going to be copycats, because there's always copycats, right? I mean, every school shooting is a copycat of Columbine. That doesn't. I just don't see this being a legal theory, or a justification, or an aggravating factor for sentencing someone to death. And to be perfectly honest, just as a policy issue, it'll have the exact opposite effect, right? If you sentence Mangione to death, he just becomes a bigger martyr, right? And so if the idea is to stop this train of kind of anarchism and nihilism, the worst way to stop that, in fact, the best way to give it more fuel, is by killing its martyr, right? By making him a full martyr, as opposed to just, what he is, a troubled young man whose politics became nihilistic, and became, a crime for which, when convicted, should be punished. But I don't think that's going to be a death penalty case.
Well, you say troubled young man though, but I mean, I'm just thinking about the family of the United Healthcare CEO. If they are thinking about this, I mean, he's a killer. I mean, he is, I mean, he's in the video. Granted, innocent until proven guilty, but he went, he planned it, shot him, I think, from behind. Um,
Right? He
so,
did. It was
so
it was an assassination.
yeah. So I mean, you don't think that that's worthy of the death penalty?
No, I don't think a jury uh, would um, would sentence someone to death for that, because in a death penalty trial, right? There's two phases. There's the guilt phase, and then there's the penalty phase, right? Death penalty cases, the guilt is almost a foregone conclusion, right? Nobody goes to trial on a death penalty case where there are issues of proof, and getting a conviction is going to be a difficult thing, right? Prosecutor can believe that a person is guilty, but also know that it's a difficult case to prove. Then you go into the other phase, which is the penalty phase, where you have both sides have, present evidence. There's aggravating factors from the prosecution, and there's mitigating factors from the defense. I don't, I mean, the mitigation is pretty clear to me in terms of youth, misguided, all the potential that he has. There will be mitigation experts. He has a very strong defense team. I mean, look, there's a reason why the Boston bombers weren't sentenced to death, right? Because the youth of a person, and when they're misguided, um, will go a lot into not setting someone to death. And I don't think anybody's saying that he shouldn't be punishment or held accountable, right? We're talking about a life sentence, which is very different than the death penalty. I mean, the death penalty, even picking a jury for a death penalty is grueling. It is a grueling thing to pick up, to go. It's the questionnaires. It's not only the work, but you I've done it. You look at a room full of strangers. The only thing you know is whatever they fill in a questionnaire, and you have to look at them point blank in the face and point to the defendant and said, "Can you, if I prove my case beyond reasonable, and you think that he deserves a sentence, can you look at him and tell him that you're going to sentence him to death?" Right? Everybody loves to talk about there's always, whenever there's the death penalty mentioned, people talk about it like it's just another form of punishment
Mm.
without ever really realizing what it means to sentence someone to death and to get a jury to do it, to have it be big enough and gruesome and horrible enough to merit death, and then to launch the entire what happens afterwards. I don't obviously the what the victims want and is important, but it also has to be independent of what the system, what the prosecution decides to do, right? It's not, and we do that for a very specific reason because the prosecutorial system is not set there as a tool for vengeance. It is set as it is a mechanism in order to deter vengeance and to put it in the hands of the neutral government as opposed to the victims, right? That's supposed to be what we're trying to do here.
Back to the connection the prosecution's trying to make between Mangione and the NFL shooter. The disconnect that I felt was Mangione was going after healthcare executives, insurance industry. The NFL thing seems totally different. It doesn't seem like they made enough of a connection there.
Right. I think the connection is one of where there it is. You have, Mangione's uh, issue was, he had those back injuries, and I don't know what the problem. I mean, we still don't really know the details of whether he got denied coverage or anything like that. And clearly, it, there's an element that I don't understand because he's a person. He comes from wealth. They have money for private insurance and great insurance or to pay out of pocket. It's not like this is somebody who was struggling financially in order to get health care. Um, and with the NFL shooting, it's the same thing. I got these concussions playing football. I'm guessing the argument is I got these concussions playing football. I wanted to be an NFL star. The NFL creates this, environment where football is the, national pastime, and therefore you create, a system where young men play the sport, get hurt, and it's your fault, right? And so it's taking your whatever problems you have in your life all the way to the CEO of the corporation that creates this environment and kill him, which we can't have that. We can't have that at all. But the idea that it's inspirational and that maybe it is inspirational, but is that enough to is that should that be an aggravating factor? And I don't know. I don't know. I think it's scarier to make that an aggravating factor than to not. And what I mean by that being scarier is that if we begin a process in which what the symbolism behind someone's crime and what it inspires others to do becomes a form of thought police. And that worries me more. I think I'm kind of an absolutist when it comes to freedom of expression and First Amendment rights. Um, and it just kind of, it just reminds me too much of Minority Report, I guess, and the idea that we're policing people's thoughts.
Well, and back to what you said too, could he become even more inspiring to people if he is killed by the government?
I think so. I mean, we've seen that through world history, right? Martyrdom in all of its forms ensures your immortality.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about. So the other thing that they brought up that I found interesting in this filing is this website that he has that they say that he's openly cultivated supporters through this website. What do you think of the website? I mean, do you think it's a step too far where he's able to, in a sense, communicate with supporters?
I mean, it's something that's been going on. I mean, that's always happened, right? I mean, like one of the Menendez brothers got married while in prison, right? That these kind of celebrity defendants have always had this. It's just not public with a website. It's usually through just letters from fans and phone calls and things of that nature. But um, I understand why somebody would find this to be disturbing, but there's nothing illegal about it. And he's still permitted because he is not guilty. He's presumed innocent, I'm sorry, that he's allowed to communicate with people in kind of a public way and receive, books and letters of support and things of that nature. I mean, look, there is a certain there's a certain level of egomania involved, right? I mean, the idea, I mean, I can only imagine, or I can only imagine, but I think it's safe to presume that he sees himself as the hero, right? That he sees himself as the one that, the tip of the spear in trying to create some kind of revolution or some kind of call to arms or a wake-up call. So from his point of view, I would imagine that he thinks what he's doing makes sense because he's right. Um, and but he will people like him have and will always attract followers.
But just like reading some of this, I mean, there's like this frequently asked questions section where it's like, may I send him items like books? Can I send Luigi photos? I mean, Luigi, they say, even by his first name like that, kind of personalizing
Right.
it. What else can I send Luigi? And it's called LuigiMangioneInfo.com. It contains scanned images of and an index prepared by Luigi himself. Cataloging all of the support letters he has received. Um, I don't know. It just kind of rubs me the wrong way. I get what you're saying, that he's in our system, he's innocent until proven guilty, but um, it does seem like it sort of idolizes him and turns him into this. I've not really seen anything like that before. I get what you're saying about Menendez brothers and married, but it didn't seem quite as like public and easily accessible as this.
But I think, probably just from a practical point of view, probably one of the things that happened was his lawyers got sick and tired of, you know, not answering the phone because there was another fan calling like how can I help Luigi, right? And so maybe somebody decided like, hey, just let's do a website. Um, but and I get your point. I do think that we've always had this fascination with people like him. And I mean, when we talk about Bonnie and Clyde, we talk about their folk heroes, as opposed to, killers who killed bank tellers and people who worked at banks and killed law enforcement. But at the time, they were seen as heroes because they were robbing banks. And at the time, during the Depression, the banks were foreclosing on everyone. This is, obviously before we had FDIC. Um, and that's who we talk about. That's who is remembered in our history, at least in our myth, in our folklore. Um, and that'll always be an element of that's always going to happen because it's always happened. Whenever unfortunately, the victims of charismatic defendants are always forgotten. And I'm not defending that as what happens, but I think I'm just being honest about the reality of our history. I don't think just applies to the United States. I mean, this is kind of a worldwide phenomenon when there is, a charismatic criminal.
Yeah, I mean it's true. You're right, and there's so many people. I mean, you go on TikTok, uh, m most people are out there supporting Mangione. It seems like, at least publicly. You don't see a lot of TikToks about how bad he is. You see a lot about people saying
Right.
that they feel bad for him or that he's like a sex symbol even.
Right. I mean, look, right. I mean, we remember Jesse James. We don't remember his victims. Right. The outlaw the outlaw in American culture is part of our culture. I mean, it's part of our culture. It just is. There's always been a fascination with the outlaw. Tony Soprano was, was an anti-hero that everyone tuned in on Sunday nights in the 90s to see. And there is, I think it's a much deeper question. And obviously there's, historians that can speak about this much better than I can. But but I think before we get too shocked with ourselves and our current culture, we have to kind of think back as to our culture for the last 300 years, and that this has always been with us.
Is there anything you think back to the website that the judge could do to clamp down on that?
Yeah, the judge could. I mean, the government wants it shut down or wants it clamped down. It can. I can't think of anything specific that the judge would want to clamp down or would find justification for it. It's always a bad idea as a prosecutor, especially as a prosecutor. I always think it's bad form to overreach because then the judge just sees you as someone who is maximizing the use of their power and authority. And I think I would be a little more careful in terms of making demands and trying to box the defense in too much because I can end up backfiring. It's always better to ask for the reasonable than the unreasonable. Right? Because if you think, well, I'm just going to ask for everything and I'll get what I can, I always think it's much better to always have a reputation of like, I'm just asking for a reasonable thing. And that I think is a game changer. So my apologies.
Yeah, no problem. Are there any other arguments in the motion that work for you that you think were good? I mean, obviously you're not a fan of what we've just talked about in terms of them trying to say that he could be responsible for other murders and the website, but there's an argument about premeditation. He had this journal and planned the whole thing,
Yeah,
prosecute.
I mean, in terms of proving murder in the first degree, they have that. There's no, I mean, I think that the proof that this was first degree murder, meaning it was willful, deliberate, and premeditated, absolutely. And I think they have everything necessary in order to um, prove first degree murder. I think the evidence is overwhelming. And the motive, in a murder case, you don't have to prove motive. But they have all the evidence they need for motive. So the look. Let me just say something about this as a federal matter. I don't know why it was done. I think the department. Let me say this carefully. The Department of Justice under this administration is doing things dramatically different than ever before in terms of tradition. This is no, this is not breaking news that U.S. attorneys' office throughout the country, especially in large areas, are losing U.S. attorneys that are quitting because of the policies, and that there's a certain level of disarray and dysfunction. Right? Give you a perfect example here. I'm out of Los Angeles, in the Central District of California, which is 7 counties and probably about 25 million people. About a third of the office quit. I My opinion is that the only reason that the federal government picked up this case was it because it was a celebrity case, it was a big case, and they wanted a celebrity case. And that's part of what this administration does. Because I I mean I very much could be wrong, but I don't see a jury in New York City ever giving him death. And that conversation of, well, if we should we seek the death penalty? Um, and the second question is, would a jur do we think 12 people would agree to that? And I don't think anyone would. I don't know the lawyer that thinks that this is a death penalty case. And I think the only reason they did it was because of the celebrity status of the case, and the fact that New York State doesn't have the death penalty.
What do you
But
think?
even in California, we wouldn't. And I don't look. I've done this work. and I don't see anybody in California seeking the death penalty on this guy. Even even conservative communities like Orange County or Riverside County would seek death because it's not it doesn't rise to the level of a murder of uh, warranting the execution of a person.
You mentioned the feds taking it. What do you think of there's sort of like this battle going on? You have the federal government, you have the state with charges, and then you also have the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. Does it surprise you that there's all three? And who do you think should go first?
Well, I think the Pennsylvania case is the least of it. I mean, I think it's the who should go first is who gets usually federal cases have priority over state cases in terms of management, right? If I'm in the state court, I tell the judge, I'm like, hey, I can't, I need to continue this over. I'm starting a federal trial next week, and the 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 judge will have no problem continuing my matter in state court because of a federal matter. Um, and so usually the federal case would go first. And whenever a defendant has a state and a federal case, usually the federal case goes first. And one of the reasons is that a lot of times that the punishment in a federal case is worse or more than a state case. And so that might help make the state case go away in terms of, look, if you take a plea for the same charge, we'll run it concurrent or something to that effect, right? We'll let you serve your sentence in any penal institution, is the language used in order to save um, the resources of having to do another, a murder trial. But I could, I'm not sure which case is going to go first. I just don't. But I think the Pennsylvania case is the least important by far.
Well, it's interesting when you brought up the politics of it because, you know, and his lawyers have talked about this. But after he got arrested, it almost felt like a movie, the way they paraded him through New York City and the mayor
Right.
was there. And then the feds got involved. And you had, I think it was Pam Bondi. I think she was already, there, saying that we're going to do death. Like it did kind of feel like everybody wanted a piece of it.
Right. I mean, right. The mayor was there. I mean, and who's running for reelection. And, Eric Adams is not, I mean, he's got problems. Let's just leave it at that. And, they do this whole perp walk with, he's shackled in his feet and his hands, and there's like 20 guys. And then, you know what? I think they landed a helicopter or somehow. I
Yeah.
mean, it was like this, and it was made for TV. I mean, they're I mean, it's a very simple case to prove. It just seems that the same people that are talking about this being a media frenzy, and that Mangione is doing this for attention, et cetera, et cetera. Kind of what we're talking about today, uh, are also the people that want a piece of that action.
Yeah, it does make you wonder if this could backfire. Like if you're the CEO's family and you want justice and you want the death penalty, is all of this attention that all of these different agencies have put on the case, is it actually going to end up hurting the case?
Right, because you feed the machine that you feed the fans, right? This if there's a group up there that, for the people that support him and see him as a hero and a victim, that that just feeds that feeling, that mentality, the idea that he's the one who should be protected, not, someone who's shot in cold blood.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens. Ambrosio, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.